Hey, it's Renee from the craft table. We are at week 5 of our Summer Embroidery Stitch Along. This week we are learning how to do French knots. My video tutorial will not be as long as the last couple of ones have been because it doesn't take very long to demonstrate the French knot. Even though we are now almost done with June, we are week 5, as I said. I am still getting notifications of people signing up for the Stitch Along, so that is awesome. Thank you for being here, and if you have told a friend about it, I appreciate that as well. That's probably how people are finding out. And people can join in anytime. All of the previous week's videos are stored on YouTube, so you can go back and find any of the ones that you might have missed or rewatch them as many times as you want. I still have some of the kits for the Summer Stitch Along. The kit is not necessary, but if you were interested in getting one, I still have some in the shop, so I'll link to that as well. And one other thing, my sister was here recently. I'm in Montana, in case you missed that. I'm on vacation. And so my sister was here. It was her birthday and mine's coming up. So we try and celebrate our birthdays together, which is always fun, always nice. And we had a great time. And we did a little bit of stitching outside on the porch. And I have a little bit of video of that. So since the tutorial is pretty short, I probably will include that in here as well. So I hope you kind of enjoy a little bit of behind the scenes of me stitching with my sister. I will warn you, there are no filters and we had our hair up and we were just, anyway. It's definitely not a professional photo shoot, not that any of mine are, but anyway, hope you enjoy it. I hope you really like making French knots. I do. And once you get the hang of it, they are super fun. You can use them in so many places in your embroidery. All right, let's get started. The French knot is great to stitch in places where there are circles. Just in the places inside this hoop, I spot 4 areas that would be good for stitching the French knot. On top of this flower over here, there are like 3 antennas with circles on top. Same over here, there are 2 red circles. And then inside this flower, you can see there are areas, they're not really circles, most of them are ovals. And then inside this flower, there are some dots. So all those are a good place to do a French knot because the circle that's on the fabric is pretty much going to be your guide. Another way that you can apply French knots to your stitching is if you wanted to cover up an area. It's a good filler stitch. It takes a while, but it's a really good filler stitch. So you could even, where this darker orange area is here, you could fill in that whole area with French knots. I'm going to demonstrate how to do the French knot, and regardless of whether I am stitching right here, or here, here, or here, the stitch is the same. However, the type of thread that you use will determine how large your knot is, as well as how many times you wrap that thread around your needle. I am working with the 5-weight Sue Spargo pearl cotton. All right, so I'm going to start by stitching these little white dots right here. And I'm going to bring my needle up from the back where I want my knot to be. So I'm just going up in the middle of that one circle right there. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to demonstrate this quite a few times. So if you want to just watch before you start stitching. So I'm going to take my thread and kind of giving it a little bit of pressure
making it kind of taut. Put my needle there, and I'm going to wrap my thread around my needle twice. So I'm going to go 1, 2, and the key is holding on to that thread that's in your non-needle holding hand. And then I'm going to put my needle right back where I came up, holding this thread taut. And I will continue to hold that thread taut as I'm pulling my needle to the back. And then I let go, and then I pull the thread back. All right, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Now, this area and the size of these dots here are quite close together, and they're quite small, and I'm using a pretty thick floss. So let's try that again and only wrap it maybe one time. So I'm bringing my needle up from the back, right kind of in the middle of that dot, holding my thread over a little bit, got my needle, and I'm wrapping it one time. I'm going to put my thread or my needle right back down where I came up, holding that thread over here as I pull the needle down to the back. So can you see the difference between just wrapping it once versus wrapping it 2 times? So I think I like the one. When I did this panel the first time, I did not stitch this area. But I think I like the one, wrapping it one time. I think I like the look of that. So I'm going to keep doing that. So wrapping it one time, holding it as I put my needle back down right where it came up. And again, the key is holding this thread tight in your non-dominant hand as you pull the needle to the back. I think I forgot to mention the color of thread I am using. So this is the Eleganza Suspargo 5-weight, and it's called Snow, but the number is EZ06. Now, if you're working with different threads besides the 5-weight, or if you're working with the kit and have 8-weight or other threads at home, you might even want to, if you think this is too thick, this is the smallest area we'll be doing the French knots on, but you could use an 8-weight thread, maybe use only 1 or 2 strands of DMC floss to make it smaller, but I do like the texture. I mean, if you're going to do French knots, it's because you really want the texture and you want your stitches to be obvious, because the French knot is not something that's it's not a wallflower stitch, you know. So I say go for it and do your French knots. however you like them. I could, you know, I don't even know if you can tell, and with me filming and stitching at the same time, it's kind of difficult to see. If you can even tell the difference once, you know, I have all these stitches around, which one was done wrapping it 2 times and which one was done just wrapping it 1 time. But if I wanted to, I still think there was room that I could have done all of them wrapping the thread twice. This area over here, the white spots are not necessarily circles, and they're very organic and they're different sizes. So there's a couple of different ways that you can implement the French knot stitch over here. So let's do a couple. And some of these smaller ones that look kind of like a circle, like this pretty much is round. So I'm probably going to do what I did before, and I'm probably going to wrap it 2 times. So I brought it up from the back, and I've got my thread over here, and I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to wrap it 1 time, 2 times, and take it back down. And I'm going to take it to the back. Now, just like some of the other stitches that we did, when you're stitching in it, when you're stitching in a new area and you've brought your needle up from the back for the first stitch and you've got the knot on the back, and you are doing a stitch where you're going right back down where you came up, you've always got that knot back there that you have to be careful of. And the same thing goes with doing a French knot. You want to make sure when you take that needle back down, if you feel any resistance, it's probably because your needle is trying to go through the knot on the back, and you don't want that. It's a mess. So just pull your needle back a little bit, you know, reposition the knot on the back and try it again. So, so the wrapping it 2 times in that area, I pretty much covered that stitch. So I think that's good. So with this bigger one, I could either do 2 stitches in this one area, wrap it maybe 3 times, or because we're working with something that's very whimsical and organic, what I'm probably going to do, well, what I would probably do if I was not demonstrating different stitches is I would just still do wrapping it 2 times and not worry that it didn't cover the whole area. But for demonstration purposes, I'm going to show you what it looks like if we wrap it 3 times. So 1, 2, 3. Well, it's hard to tell on the camera, but there is a difference if you're doing it. If you see it in person. Also, one reason why I don't think you should, well, let me just show you. If you wrap it too many times, you know, to try and get a bigger knot, all it's going to do is just make the knot really flimsy, for lack of a better word. You know, it's not covering a wider area as much as you would think. It's just going to make it taller, and it's not as neat. So I think I have wrapped it maybe 4 times, but I try not to wrap it more than 3. So I'm going to just show you 4 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And so this is really close. See, it just kind of gets, you know, it's not neat. So that is really all there is to the French knot. It's just a matter of practicing. I mean, you may get it on the first try. I love the French knot. And as with the chain stitch, I've got students that'll come in and I'll tell them, you know, I love the French knot, and I demonstrate it. And some of them they'll try it for the first time, or maybe even if it takes them a couple of times, but when they get it, they're like, oh my gosh, I did it. This is amazing. And then there are some students, not very many, that will say, I do not really like this stitch at all, but I I love it, and I suggest, as with the Stitch Along, any of the stitches, you try them all, and you can decide whether you want to keep doing them or just kind of say, you know what, I know how to do that stitch. I've mastered it, but it's not my favorite, so I'm going to move on to something else. But once you get the hang of it, all you really need to decide is where to stitch it, how many times to wrap it, you know, what thickness of thread. If you're doing DMC, how many strands do you want to use? Or what, you know, I say DMC. Same applies to the Cosmo threads, the Arfil floss, anything that's 6-stranded. You can decide how many strands of floss that you want to use. If you're using pearl cotton, you can decide, oh, do I want to use 8-weight, 5-weight, 3-weight is even thicker than the 5-weight. I don't typically stitch with that very much, but I used to also say that about the 5-weight. So who knows? I wanted to show you a couple things. I added French knots here. 1, 2, 3. I added my French knots first, and after I did that, I got to thinking, anyway, I went back and I did the back stitch in the same color along those veins. When I stitched these French knots, I started right here. I stitched that one. So I took advantage of the thread that I had on the back of my work. I just sort of pretend like I'm on the back of my work. I finished my stitch, and then I just ran my needle under like one of these pink back stitches and then came up here. Again, I did this on the back. That way, I don't have one long loose piece of thread. It's tucked underneath the existing stitches on the back. So that's just a tip. I don't like to have loose threads this far apart. There's just more chance of them getting snagged on the back. But anyway, that's how I did my 3 French knots that were spaced a little bit further apart. I have decided I'm not going to do the French knot here. I don't think. I think I'm going to save that area for when we do the satin stitch and just show you an alternative way of filling in an area that could be used for the French knot, but could also be used for something else. So that's what I'm going to save that one for. This is the first panel that I did. And this is that same area that I just stitched. And what's interesting is the first time around, I didn't do French knots in those areas at all. So you can see here, no French knots, no back stitch where the white is, no French knots here, no French knots there. So where I did do French knots the first time around, inside of this flower, which I'm gonna do again on this panel, I did the little antennas on the butterfly here, and there's another butterfly over here, and then again that flower. So I didn't even really do the French knot in too many places the first time around, which surprises me now that I'm looking at the panel. So this time around, I am looking forward to doing French knots in some other places that I didn't do the first time around. There's so many places that you can do French knots, and I had talked about how, finding circles were a good place to do French knots, and that is absolutely still the case. But you can also use French knots as a filler stitch. You can see here, I used French knots as a filler stitch for this heart shape. I used various different reds in the center and then a pink on the outside. Now, this is a very small heart. It's inside a 3-inch embroidery hoop. And I didn't really count, obviously, didn't really count how many French knots it took to fill it up. And it took quite some time. But what I did is I just drew a heart shape and started stitching around the lined heart, the drawn heart. And then I just kept filling in the area with French knots, just stitching, right next to the previous French knot until it was filled up. Again, it takes a while, but I enjoyed the process, and I would pick up this project and stitch some and then put it down and bring it back out again. So I didn't work on it constantly. Here is an example where I used French knots to sort of spell out the word peace, P-E-A-C-E. You have to kind of look at it in a certain way in order to see that that's what the negative space spells. So again, I traced out the letters and used a variegated thread, my favorite color, and started stitching around the shaped word peace, and then just kept adding French knots, working my way out until I felt like I had enough of a border to highlight the word peace. And here's a close-up photo of some of the letters. Again, I find French knots very relaxing. So I was on a French knot kick for a while and made this one too. All right, I promised you a video of my sister and I stitching outside on the porch. Instead, here's a photo of my sister and I sitting outside on the porch, enjoying each other's company, drinking coffee, and doing some hand embroidery. I hope she doesn't mind that I posted this picture. I think I got permission from her. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this week's video, and I also hope that you are finding some time to embroider, whether that is inside or outside, and whether that is with a sister or not, or a friend. Either way, enjoy it. Happy stitching, and I will see you next week.